Wouldn't bother me staying in, I just thought of you thinking.
Okay, I'll call this regional council meeting to order. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually, is being streamed and recorded. Should virtual attendees wish to address council during either the public comment period or the question and answer period, use the raise hands feature on your webinar controls. When it's your turn and are prompted, unmute your microphone, state your name, and ask your question. Once your question is ended, you will be muted again. Are there any council additions? Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, just a concern from the BC Wildlife Federation.
Thank you. And I have an addition to the proclamations, so it'll require that I put that in the proclamations section. Councillor Andrews, you'll be in the last section. Any other council additions? Any CAO additions?
No, Mayor.
Very well. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, please? Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Gerwing. All those in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes. The Special Regional Council of February 7th, Special Regional Council of February 2nd, Special Regional Council of January 24th, Special Regional Council of January 24th, and Special Regional Council of January 17th, all of 2022. Can I get a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Andrews. Seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Public comment period. Are there any virtual attendees who wish to comment on tonight's agenda? Very well, thank you. Proclamations. BC Epilepsy Society. Whereas Purple Day is celebrated on March 22nd annually during Epilepsy Awareness Month to increase the knowledge and understanding of epilepsy that will improve the quality of life of British Columbians living with epilepsy. And whereas Purple Day was founded in 2008 by Cassidy Megan, a 9-year-old girl from Nova Scotia who wanted people living with epilepsy to know that they were not alone. And whereas people in communities around the world are encouraged to wear purple and host events in support of epilepsy awareness on Purple Day, and whereas there are over 50,000 people in British Columbia, over 380 people in Canada, and over 65 million people worldwide living with epilepsy, and whereas the onset of epilepsy can occur at any age and stage of life and does not discriminate against age, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic status, geographic location, or sexual orientation. And whereas Purple Day is a health promotion effort that encourages people to raise awareness of epilepsy so that we can create a society that embraces the beauty of difference and understanding how we can all come together to make the world a better place. Now, therefore, I, Gary Foster, Mayor of the Northern Rockies Municipality, do hereby proclaim Saturday, March 26th, 2022 as Purple Day in the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. Whereas the Fort Nelson and District Chamber of Commerce is a business organization dedicated to strengthening the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality business community, and whereas the Chamber leveraged platforms and tools to ask questions, encourage conversation, spark discussion and actions, those insights to further community development, and whereas the Chamber supports and advocates for policy development based on innovative ideas, on-the-ground experience, and using evidence-based data. And whereas a strong local business community is a key driver of our local economic prosperity, creating jobs and opportunities for residents of the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. And whereas every year members of the Fort Nelson and District Chamber of Commerce dedicate countless volunteer hours in service to our local business and community. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Gary Foster, do hereby proclaim the week of February 14th to 18th, 2022 as Chamber of Commerce Week in the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. Angelman Awareness Day. Whereas February 15th, 2022 is designated International Angelman Awareness Day, and whereas one of our citizens, Benjamin, has been diagnosed with Angelman syndrome. And whereas this community shares and supports each other in their struggles and their challenges, and whereas the residents of the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality are encouraged to wear blue on February 15th, 2022 in support of Benjamin and his family. Now, therefore, I, Gary Foster, Mayor of the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality, do hereby proclaim February 15th, 2022 Angelman Awareness Day. Reports, administration report. Very well.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for letting me speak for just a second. I just wanted to express my appreciation for the proclamation for Chamber Week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Vandersteen. Reports and bylaws. Administration report number 12, stumpage policy for community forests for discussion. Mrs. Thompson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jaylene, can you just let me know if you can hear me? I'm having issues with my headset.
We can hear you. We just can't see you, but that's okay.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so good evening, Mayor and Council. Based on a letter that we received on December the 17th from the Burns Lake Community Forest expressing concern regarding the province's intention to harmonize stumpage policies for community forests, we've drafted a report for your consideration. I would like to note that at the time, the letter from the Burns Lake Community Forest was shared in an in-camera Regional Council meeting. However, since writing this report, we have received permission from the Burns Lake Community Forest to speak to that letter in our presentation tonight. I'm also aware that there has been further conversation regarding this matter through the Resource Municipalities Coalition. So even furthering the need to share some information with you tonight regarding this matter. So in the report, I've identified that since 2017, the province has been exploring opportunities to modernize the forest sector in British Columbia, and proposed forest policy changes referred to as intentions are identified in a provincial document titled Modernizing Forest Policy in British Columbia. One of the intentions in the document, which was also the subject of the letter from the Burns Lake Community Forest, was to rectify a disparity between stumpage rates for various area-based tenures, specifically woodlot licenses, community forest agreements, and First Nation woodland licenses. For clarity, area-based forest tenures grant licensees virtually exclusive right to harvest timber within a defined geographical area, whereas volume-based tenures are generally large areas that could potentially have several licensees operating within that same area. For the purpose of tonight's discussion, a community forest is an area-based tenure, and stumpage rates for this type of area-based tenure are determined through the Interior Appraisal Manual. So you can see in the report that the three area-based tenures that are being referenced, which are community forest agreements, woodlot licenses, and First Nation woodland licenses. Both the community forest agreements and woodlot licenses are stumpage rates are determined through table 6-2 of the Interior Appraisal Manual, whereas First Nation woodland licenses stumpage rates are determined through full appraisal. So essentially the province is intending on harmonizing those stumpage policies so that those three area-based tenures are somewhat consistently determined. In the administration report, there's some information for your consideration regarding tabular stumpage rates versus fully appraised stumpage rates. So without going into too much detail, it's important to note that with both pricing policies, there are pros and cons to each system of pricing timber. So for example, a tabular stumpage rate, this is a table that's identified in the Interior Appraisal Manual, and it provides licensees with some certainty as to what their stumpage rate is going to be over a defined period of time. It also negates the need for a licensee to have to go out and do costly exercises like timber cruising and submission of an appraisal. And in the report, there's also an example of what that table 6-2 from the Interior Appraisal Manual would look like. So for example, a licensee operating in a community forest in Fort Nelson currently would pay $11.55 a cubic meter for spruce. And those table rates generally stay somewhat consistent throughout the period of a year unless there are updates to the appraisal manual. So again, you can see how these table rates would provide some consistency and some bit of assurance to a licensee of what their stumpage rates are going to be over the next year. Full appraisal stumpage rates, however, are determined through things like timber cruising and a full appraisal submission to the province. So by going out and doing a timber cruise, you're essentially collecting data specific to a stand of timber. So the stumpage rate that's calculated also takes into consideration some operational factors such as cycle time, road construction costs, and things like that. So you end up generating a stumpage rate that's more reflective of the actual stand, but obviously there's some operational costs that you need to incur as a licensee that you wouldn't necessarily incur if you were using a table rate. So based on the information that I provided, timber pricing is fairly complex, and it does have its advantages and disadvantages. And it's important that each area-based tenure holder is informed how the province intention to harmonize stumpage rates would affect them in their particular situation. The Fort Nelson Community Forest has been provided with a copy of the letter from the Burns Lake Community Forest, and we have been in contact with the Fort Nelson Community Forest Board to ensure that this is something that they are going to consider in an upcoming meeting. So accordingly, if Regional Council wishes to support CFA holders, a letter encouraging the province to engage directly with Fort Nelson CFA and other CFA holders throughout the province may be appropriate. And I'll just turn it over to Mayor and Council for any comments.
Thank you. Councillor Souls, any comments on this?
Yes, I think that it is. I recommend that we do request more information or be participants in the discussion as to how this is rolled out. I see, because of having experienced both of the different types of forest appraisal in my personally, and now working alongside of and with the community forest, I think that clarity is needed as to which direction this harmonization will go. Because if we harmonize toward the appraisal system so that we're all moved into that, it will severely curtail or stifle community forest work. And whereas I believe that it would be wise to move the First Nation forest, who's now under the more expensive and more difficult, much more expensive and more difficult appraisal system on their woodlot licenses, I think it makes sense to harmonize it toward what is existing in the tabular rates. So I see a value in being at the table to get clarity on it.
So I'll take it that is a motion then to follow the just the motion that's before us here. Okay. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Souls' motion? Seconded by Councillor Andrews. Is there any other comment on this? Councillor Gerwig.
Yeah, what exactly is the motion?
The motion is Regional
That
Council.
Wishes to support the
Yeah.
CFA? Okay, thank you.
Mrs. McIver, are you clear on this motion?
It's written in the report, right?
Yeah.
Not what? Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, good.
Very well. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Admin report number 13. Tax annual report follow-up recommendations within report. Ms. Vandersteen.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sorry, I just clicked on the wrong one and got myself all confused. So this report is brought back to you from your last council meeting in January. where the Tourism Advisory Committee presented a letter to Regional Council with a number of different requests for discussion, including some recommendations. So there are 8 that are listed in this admin report. Would council be amenable to going through them topic by topic or in another fashion?
I think topic by topic should be okay.
Okay, perfect. So topic 1, the Tourism Advisory Committee was looking to update the terms of reference or the terms of office and their recruitment timelines, just because starting in the summer months was a little bit of a struggle this past summer because of people being away, both continuing on members as well as new members. So there is a recommendation here that staff just continue to work with the Tourism Advisory Committee and plan to adjust recruitment timeframes for 2023 for what makes sense from an efficiency and maintaining momentum.
Councillor Penny?
So we're going to go topic by topic. We want
Yep.
to vote on each one
Yep.
individually, correct? So, I mean, this one is pretty straightforward. It's just, we believe it'd be a lot easier if we start off with the term starting off in January. So I think it's a brainer. So I'd make the motion that we approve this change.
I'll second it. All those in favor? Carried. Topic 2.
Topic 2. So there was no recommendation on this at the time of writing for the publishing of this, as the $5,000 carry forward is already in the proposed budget that you've now seen. So that can just be continued forward through the regular consideration and approval process for the budget. However, I did want to bring forward that at our last Tourism Advisory Committee meeting, which was last Wednesday after the agenda was published, the Tourism Advisory Committee made a motion to request that council up the current proposed budget for tourism strategy implementation to be increased to a total of $50,000. So I just want to bring that forward at this time as a new budget item from the Tourism Advisory Committee.
Councillor Penny?
So this is just to add it onto, there was, I believe, there's 23,000 originally. Was it Krista?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. And through discussions at the last TAC and discussing what we may be able to accomplish throughout the year with the strategic plan, we feel that capacity was going to be one of the major holdbacks. And we felt like we had access, because obviously, for one thing, even if we disapprove it tonight, to get it added to there during our budget deliberations, it may disappear again, right? It's not a pre-approval. This is just that we want to change what the ask is. And, but I just want to give you the background for it, is just, we want it, if we feel that we have opportunities to move further down the strategic plan, we want to have funds there to add capacity, which would be possibly take a project out of the strategic plan and put it out for tender, hire a contractor to take care of a certain piece, because we've, as we all know, capacity inside this building is lessened. So that was the reason to increase this. I'm hoping that we can get more to strategic plan moved forward.
Councillor,
So I'm just unclear as to what is before me right now. So topic 2 budget, it says that's requested that the existing budget of 2021 of $5,000 be carried forward into 2022. So is that what I'm voting for on topic 2, or are we now talking about the increase of the 23?
So basically, I mean, we wouldn't even be voting. We're not pre-approving this. It's, I think, more informational at this point that
Okay,
we are going to increase the ask of TAC
Yeah.
to the total of 50,000, up to $50,000. That's,
okay, but do you
Basic-
want a motion on this budget about the $5,000 being carried? That was, I think, for the orientation tour that didn't
Yeah.
take place.
Yeah.
So do you still want to address that tonight, this $5,000 from 2021 to be carried forward to 2022? Or you just?
I think that will already occur at the budget meeting, will it not?
I think so.
So no
Sorry.
motion is required and it'll just simply go on to the budget. Okay. Topic number 3, tourism strategy, approval change of action to action committee.
Yeah, so in this one here, in the italics, kind of indented section, that is all directly from the tourism strategy, and highlights a few things, including the discussion point that the Tourism Advisory Committee brought forward to discuss changing to an action committee. From a review, the advisory committees are not recognized under legislation, so they will just follow the terms of reference set out by council. So there is no concerns over being an advisory board versus a action committee. And then there is a slight change into the purpose of the tourism, the terms of reference for the committee, just to change from being connected to the regional economic strategy, which was the most up-to-date connected strategy when the Tourism Advisory Committee was created initially, to be directly focused on the regional tourism strategy. So there is a recommendation at the bottom of that section to make those 2 changes, to change from an advisory committee to an action, as well as to change the terms of reference as noted in the purple edition and the crossed out section.
Thank you. Any comments, Councillor Penny?
I no.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just unsure as to, like, it's the last paragraph where it says any expenses contemplated or incurred by the NRM at the tax request recommendation would have to be within the approved budget and subject to the NRM's purchasing policy and procedure, with final approval to be that of the staff person assigned. So how would this work then? Let's say it's the budget for TAC is approved at $50,000 for next year. Council is now hands off as to how that $50,000 is dispersed. The way I'm reading this is, as long as it's in the strategic plan, then TAC can spend that money according, as long as it's done with the purchasing policy and procedures and the staff person has final approval. Do I have that captured correctly?
So can I just offer something, Krista?
Absolutely, jump in.
So essentially, the budget that you're talking about, the $50,000, council would approve to implement the tourism strategic plan. So those activities would have to fall within the strategic plan. What this is saying is exactly that the TAC isn't given the $50,000 budget, but they're provided some input as to what tactics are undertaken within that year's budget to implement the tourism strategic plan. The $5,000 is kind of just operating funds to conduct your business as a committee. So it could be your, like you said, the orientation meeting, it could be meals if and when people can sit together again and things like that. So
then just to reconfirm, so at the budget meeting, we vote for the $50,000 for the tourism budget, and then TAC, and then as long as the activities are in the strategic plan, then it's at TAC will execute that. Is that what this is saying?
that was the intention. Yeah.
Without it coming back to council, it would just then be.
Any
So-
other comments?
Can I just?
Oh, go ahead.
So I guess my concern is that there's a lot of different activities in all of the years of the tourism strategic plan. So if there's a budget of $50,000 and then council is hands off, then it's up to TAC to decide what activities that is going to happen in that year. Yes?
Yes.
Mrs. Vandersteen.
Thank you. I actually had a slightly different take on that. So my understanding was that when we were discussing this was that council would still be involved in major purchase decisions. It would work the same way any of your other budgets do in terms of what staff is allowed to do or allowed to put forward. So if there was any, that would become up to staff to know your policies and procedures and when it has to go back to council. I don't see this as giving carte blanche to the Tourism Advisory Committee to go out and spend $50,000. But the discussion was with the 23,000 roughly that was already in the budget for the purposes of putting activities within the strategy, was that may not be enough depending on what we recommend to council over the next year and what council comes up with on their own. And that thus the increase to 50,000. So it really isn't a change to what you're seeing in the current budget, other than the dollar amount. And it would
I
follow
guess-
all normal staff procedures.
Councillor Gerwin.
Yeah, and I have like no issue in increasing it to $50,000, given, you know, what is stated in year one of the plan. I think my concern is that I would have thought that given the rest of our, the way that we do it is that TAC decides, okay, out of all of these strategies in year one, we are going to concentrate on A, B, and C. And then the budget is determined for all of A, B, and C, and then it comes to council, and then council has final approval. That's the way I thought it was going to happen. But when I read this, that's not the way I see it. That's not the way I read it. So I just wanted confirmation as to how it would actually take place.
Councillor
think-
Penny. Oh, sorry. Ms. Vandersteen, go ahead.
I was just going to add in that in the current budget request, there is a few items that is listed specifically in that already. So those items I would think would be moved forward as council, if council approves that specific budget, because that is listed already in the description of that budget. And then the additional funds would be available for more conversation as we move through the year and through the implementation. And then just to reinforce that our purchasing policy and everything, the Tourism Advisory Committee can't process an invoice themselves. So it would all funnel through regular staff and purchasing for whether or not myself or the director or Scott, as per our purchasing policy and procedures.
Councillor Penny.
And I assume with any tenders that we would put out or want to put out or anything like that, following in the purchasing policies, it would come back through here anyway, to be honest. Well, it would, in the fact that it follows the purchasing policies, so.
But I don't know that the purchasing policy says it has to come back to council. See, the way I'm thinking about it is, let's just say Public Works has, I don't know, $50,000 budget, which is way out of line, but you know what I mean? It's like, so we budget that, we decide that in May or whenever we make those final decisions. And then the projects are listed as to how that money is going to be spent. And then we vote on each one of those projects, right? And then if anything comes up in the year, there's money in the budget, and then we vote on that. So maybe I'm missing a piece here, and I'm sorry if I'm flogging a dead horse, but I just see these words as not reflecting what happens with the rest of the organization.
I don't think you're flogging a dead horse. I think checks and balances are important, and, you know, we have to make sure that what's agreed to and voted on here is very clear to everyone before we vote on it. So thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Gerwin. Mr. Barry.
I think it's important that council's policy statement, because remember, if without policy, staff's just guessing. So I think it's important that council's policy statement is clear. I wouldn't mix the purchasing policy and what TAC can do together, because there's things in the purchasing policy that staff knew that's not required to bring back to council, because that's why it's a policy and it has guidelines, right? So to your example, for example, Council Brewing, there might be a budget of X listed for specific items, but if we have something required to be done that's meets that budget requirement and it meets the general umbrella of the work or the scope of work, it doesn't go back to council. It's approved through staff because the policy allows us to do that from an operations perspective, right? I think what the focus here is based on the request from or the discussion from the Tourism Advisory Committee is that looking to be an action committee is to what level does council want that committee to take action and do things outside of bringing information back to council and advising council or requesting council to do things, right? And I think that's what I'm hearing is a bit of a struggle. I totally get it and understand. To kind of flush that out to get an understanding where, at what point does the committee make decisions on their own that they can act on? Because from a purchasing policy perspective, if it's approved from a policy statement of council, the staff person can approve and spend if it's within the budget. Or from a policy direction, up to what point do you want that advisory committee, action committee, to bring in information back to council for their approval? So it probably requires a little bit more discussion within the committee also in trying to frame it possibly, because I see the opportunity to lay out a strategic plan that they have, provide the council to say, this is what we'd like to accomplish this year. This is the cost to accomplish it and the various items or activities. And then council makes that policy decision to say they either A, can act on it throughout the year within the confines of that, or B, bring the information back to council each time. So again, that's, and I am thinking that's what you're looking at between Bev and Krista and Councillor Penny.
I think so, yes. And I think that, I mean, you read these two sentences and you can get it each way, to be honest. I mean, yeah, but I mean, in reading it, it would have to be a tax request or recommendation. I mean, yes, it would have to follow within the budget, but it still reads here that the TAC would still have to come back for approval. In my mind, like the request and recommendation, it's not. I think we just need to clean up those words, make a whatever way it needs to read very specific that any TAC request would have to be approved, right? Yep.
Yes, can I jump in for a second?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've kind of muddied the waters because in the conversation with the Tourism Advisory Committee, it was kind of two separate things. It wasn't going outside of the regular policy of making recommendations to council and having council approve them. It really was just upping the existing budget that Krista had asked for to further the tourism strategy. It was about upping that. It wasn't about giving the TAC authority to spend $50,000. So, I mean, I still see us very much as having those conversations with council and following all of the processes, whatever those may be, as directed. So, and we're not actually looking for any kind of vote on that tonight. It was just kind of a heads up to let you know that that request has been made for your budget discussions.
All right. So are we going to leave this then, or do we want to vote on a recommendation, or do we want to change some wording here? Councillor Penny.
I just think, I think just changing some wording in those two sentences would work, would it not, Councillor?
Well, I'm confused with what Bev just had to say too. So I'm just wondering if we want to leave two for now and the parties to be can come to some kind of a consensus as to what that, because what I think I heard Bev said is that tonight wasn't about deciding that TAC had the ability to spend the $50,000, but it was just that the budget was going to be increased for TAC from 23,000 to $50,000, and then a plan was going to be brought back to council. Bev, is that that's what I heard. Is that what you said?
That's close. It was really, it was really about, and maybe Krista needs to jump in, because the original budget that she, to my understanding, that she had put forward was for the furtherance of the strategy, or for the first year of the strategy. And really what TAC is recommending is that the 23,000 is probably not enough for the first year, and that we would like to see $50,000 budgeted for implementing the first parts of the strategy.
Miss Vanderstein, would you like to jump in?
I don't know.
Welcome to the swamp.
Well, I think we've definitely muddied the water a little bit from the items 2 and 3. So I think the actual budget request, that can stay in the budget process to be approved at the budget time, the normal budget process time. Right now, the recommendation that was originally put forward in the admin report is to make the update to the terms of reference, to switch out the old economic, well, it's not old, the older economic strategy for the new tourism strategy. So I guess that's an easy one that we can maybe put to council. Is council open to making that change?
Councillor Gerwing.
I have no problem with making the change to the terms of reference. It's just that last paragraph that I think I would like to see fleshed out a bit more.
So maybe it's bringing forward a bit of a process for the Tourism Advisory Committee. Because I feel like that's maybe what we're missing, is what that process might be for how the Tourism Advisory Committee is interacting with council on what type of regular basis, and to actually implement this new strategy that we're all just starting with.
Councillor Gerwin.
Well, so when I read the changes to the terms of reference, I have no problem with that, because that's got nothing to do with how the budget is going to be spent. So where I need to have a better understanding as to how that $50,000 will be spent, because like when I'm looking at year 1 of the tourism strategy, $50,000 isn't going to be enough.
Mhm.
So if as a council we vote for the $50,000, I think, in my opinion, this council should still have input into what activities that $50,000 is going to go towards, because it can't cover it all. Not like based on tax recommendation and input. I have no problem with changing it from advisory to action, but it's just that last piece for me.
Councillor Penny.
I think we got spun right around. And obviously didn't help halt it at the beginning, but TOA Barry tried to bring us around, because this paragraph would be just speaking to our operational budget, not to the budget of, right? Am I wrong in thinking that this operating funds? That's at the beginning of this paragraph, it's not. So that the $5,000, what this would be referring to. 2 separate budgets on TAC, or no?
I think
Two
so, yeah.
separate
Yeah,
budgets, right?
that's 2 separate
So
budgets.
this one is speaking to the administrative operating budget, which would be the $5,000 budget, correct? Am I wrong in thinking that? That's what this,
What we might want to do is just go back.
Flesh it out, make
and
sure
just
it's-
Make sure that it's.
Let's,
Yeah.
So the
let's,
the administrative funds are $5,000.
yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily require council's approval every time there's an expense.
Exactly.
lodged
Right.
against
Yeah,
it.
which was
Yeah.
discussed.
Yeah, the larger implement.
all right. Shall we get administration to go back and redo this, or do
So
you-
could we do the terms of reference though? Can we, because Krista suggested that we make that vote.
Sure.
I would make a motion that we approve the terms of reference as updated as listed here. in the
Seconder.
admin report.
Seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried.
And then staff will come back, or TAC will come back, sorry, with an update on this funding proposal. Yes? Thank you.
Topic number 4, BC Parks membership on the TAC.
Yeah, so a little bit of an update here, as conversations have continued with BC Parks. So BC Parks has advised that they are happy to participate in the Tourism Advisory Committee. However, they would like to have a non-voting, more of a liaison position, to separate them from any votes that might come out of the Tourism Advisory Committee. So we've just made a recommendation that we create a BC Parks non-voting liaison position as part of the terms of reference under membership, and then that we can just send a quick letter to Chelsea Snitson, who is the Liard area supervisor, informing her of that change and welcoming her to her or one of her staff designates to that position.
Very well, and I'll make the motion that we follow the recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Penny. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Topic number 5, Liard Hot Springs and Hot Water FISA inquiry.
Yeah, so right on Wednesday at the publishing date here, we did get a copy of a letter that MLA Dan Davies wrote to Minister Heyman, as well as a reply, very fast reply from Minister Heyman regarding these concerns over the potential closure of the hot springs and if it was actually a real concern. So those letters are both in the correspondence section. At this time, writing another letter, I don't think would provide any additional information. So that's where that one's at.
Very well, and I see Councillor Penny.
I actually, speaking with Urs today, and he brought up one good point about this in particular. In reading that letter that was sent back, the mention that if, as long as patrons of the area, or however it was worded, as long as they follow the rules, then there shouldn't be any closure. It didn't sound very good to me. You know, it's very vague on what those rules are, and very much wondering, does the park staff have enough capacity to implement these rules to ensure that people are following them? So, yeah. So then, is it going to be then 6 months or a year down the road, we find out they're just going to come back and say, yeah, you haven't been following the rules, and they shut it down. So just be mindful of that. Not that I want to change what we're doing here, but I just, that was a very good, valid point today, I thought, from Urs, that it's a pretty scary thought, the way it's written, that, you know, as long as we follow the rules, we will, but we don't necessarily have the capacity to make sure that we're there to remind people to follow those rules.
But maybe we can put some signage, sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Maybe we can put some signage up, right? Like for protection of this is, you know, what we need to do.
Well, this also falls into their capacity, because I think they need to make it very well known of why, you know, they're closing that upper pool. And then I don't think, there's been lots of rumors go back and forth of why it closed. I mean, I've heard so many stories of why it closed. So where's the big write-up? You know, there should be a huge board up there at the bottom. Not that big. It doesn't, if you're going to be one of those people that are going to sneak up there and go up to that pool, I don't think that it's in your face enough to make them really think. I mean, sure, it might still have some people to do it, but if people realize, you know, how much they could threaten this for everybody else. Anyway, something to keep in mind, and maybe a motion later.
Topic number, I'm sorry. Mrs. Vandersteen.
Thank you. I just did want to add to that, because I have had conversations with both the park operator as well as Chelsea Snitson from BC Parks. I really do think that the minister was doing kind of standard minister doublespeak in that letter. But Chelsea has said that they do have permits from DFO because it's actually falls under the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And they do have permits in place for the next 3 years. And part of that process is actually cleaning the pool and relocating any snails that are found on the benches or steps or anything to ensure that that population isn't being impacted. And so they actually relocated to the various other areas. I do think, more signage is not a bad idea, and we can certainly bring that up with Chelsea around why those upper pools were closed. But just so you know that we have had those conversations, and I will say that the park operator and BC Parks is not concerned, from a ground level at this point.
Thank you. Any other comments? Very well. We'll move on to topic number 6, tourism attraction resources. Miss Vandersteen.
Yeah, so this was one of the, well, they're all items that were listed in the letter from the Tourism Advisory Committee. Didn't dive too deep into this one, but if staff or if council would like, staff could bring back more information related to current capacity and associated priorities within the economic development portfolios for council's consideration.
Any comments, council? Councillor Gerwing?
Well, I was just gonna say, I would like to hear from Councillor Penny as to the priority for this, given everything that our staff currently has on their plate. Is this a high priority of the of TRAC, or is it yeah?
Councillor Penny.
I don't think so either. I think Vandersteen summed it up there, that high level, but this is also why we'll get back to when we discuss the extra money in there about for the tourism to be able to use outside sources, perhaps, to because I think we all know that our capacity in here is already limited, and the last thing we need to do is ask for them to do up a report of how limited they are, because it only tax them even more. So, okay, we can ignore that one. Yep. Move on.
Very well. So we're going to ignore this recommendation then of number 6. Okay. Topic number 7, business value of tourism study.
So this one came up in a recent conversation at the TAC table related to the value of having some more data and resident and stakeholder buy-in. So I did just provide a little bit of additional information about a traditional value of tourism study. No recommendation from staff at this point. So just for information on that one.
Any comments? Councillor Penny.
Yes, this has been brought up, and I think it's brought up as a survey was the original thought of this, but it's more of the engagement and education piece. And the more businesses I've kind of contacted in the last couple of weeks since this has come up, really has shown me that it is necessary. Because I don't think there's a lot of companies out there that make quite a bit of their yearly revenue comes from tourism, and they don't realize it. So that's what this whole point was to develop. Like I said, the first thought that came in my mind when I thought about it was a survey, but it's going to be more of an engagement and education piece, which I know is something we talked about at the TAC when it comes completely about whether we develop another program for teaching everybody. But I really think with businesses, we need to reach out there and discuss with them and have them realize how much tourism means to them.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Gerwing.
So is this something that'll go back to TAC, and a proposal would be like, I don't see this as coming back to council. Like, I see this as something that TAC would just do in the course of their business, like.
Ms. Vandersteen?
It can be brought back to TAC for further consideration, and there are a lot of items within the strategy that may fall under that tourism strategy implementation. Budget items that are related to stakeholder engagement and resident buy-in support. Those are 2 out of the 5 key areas of the strategy. So from a general perspective, and depending on how the TAC suggests moving forward on it, it could fit very well there.
Thank you. Councillor Penny.
Yeah, and like I said, this is just things that came up last time, so we're rehashing it now, but again, I think it's with staff capacity, this is probably gonna have to go, may have to look at being outsourced, you know, so it's gonna have to be after budget anyway at this point, so.
Any other comments? Very well. Moving on to topic 8, presence on the NRM website.
So just an update for council that because it was listed on the letter from the TAC, but staff can work with the TAC to get a little bit more of a presence on the website within the description, as well as working to get copies of the minutes linked directly to the TAC section of the website. So that I do not believe needs a resolution.
Any comments on that? Very well. Thank you. Moving on to administration report number 14. For information, as per discussion of January 24th, 2022 special council meeting, additional costs and details. Ms. Vandersteen.
Yeah, so just the trade shows this year, especially coming out of COVID and kind of dipping our toe back in, have been very fluid. So this is just some additional information that we didn't have at the last meeting. However, all of the shows do have staff capacity from all of across northern BC with our community partners. So there's no request at this time, but did want to provide the additional information as requested.
Thank you. Any comments? Very well. Moving on. Oh, sorry. Councillor Penny.
Is there anybody that would be interested to go down to this? It didn't work out for you to go, Councillor Andrews, to the Early Bird RV show, but
The Calgary one, for sure.
I just, after experiencing this just before everything shut down, I really think it's a great opportunity for any member of council to get down there and take part in this, so.
Yeah, I would say the Vancouver one, but my daughter wouldn't let me be gone for her birthday.
Councillor Penny, are you volunteering for this? Councillor Penny? Councillor Penny?
I'm Bueller. I
Thank you.
actually have to wait on scheduling for myself right now because there's a tournament up in the air right now, to be honest. If I can make those dates.
Wasn't there, didn't we approve something? The last meeting, a dollar value for council and staff, so I don't think we need, if somebody's interested, then we already approved that, right?
That's correct, yeah. Like I said, I just wanted to make that point if anybody else could go down there because I found it really eye-opening to see the difference on how much people actually do know about the Northern Rockies and then the spectrum that they had no idea that there was anybody above Prince George. So, and it's a really good chance for us to educate. So.
Thank you. Moving on. Admin report number 15. Fortis BCUC intervention update for information and discussion. Mr. Gilbert. And
Good
there's
evening.
Mr. Gilbert.
Good
Good
evening,
evening.
Mayor and Council. I won't go into a lot of the detail. It's already in the report. I will try to hit some of the highlights. For the sake of context, what needs to be understood from the outset is that Fortis has approached BCUC for approval to implement rate increase, actually 2 rate increases. There are 2 applications within one, but pardon me. the thing that needs to be understood in considering this is Fortis is a cost plus operation. So with the approval of BCUC, they submit their their costs, and then they are entitled to request a markup beyond that for the services that they provide. So the application that has been made seeks to move the Fort Nelson service area into the larger provincial area. There's an awful lot of terminology that you have to wade through in reading any of these reports. For the sake of simplicity, when looking at the current admin report 15, FEI can be read as Fortis everywhere else in the province, and FEFN is Fortis in the Fort Nelson region and anywhere in the Northern Rockies that receives gas service. So what they're intending to do is move the Fort Nelson area over to common rate with the rest of the province. There would be a significant increase if implemented in a single year. In the face of objections raised previously by council, by others, and I think strategically recognizing the response they would receive, they have proposed that this rate be implemented over a 10-year period. So that schedule of rate is referred to as their rate rider. The incremental impact would be variable based on what category of user was paying the rate. For example, over the period of increase, the average residential consumer would see their bill increase anywhere from $157 to $174, depending on how the calculation is made. And there's a factor in there that I'll refer to later. Small commercial would see their bill, pardon me, reduced by $350. That's reduced by $350. And large commercial industrial would see their bill reduced by about $3,300. Effectively, what's being proposed in the move to a common rate is a restructuring of the burden of cost away from large commercial and small commercial onto residential ratepayers. The change, the net change for the first category, that's residential ratepayers, would be a net increase of $319,000, while the decrease would be $132,000 and $30,000 respectively, small commercial, large commercial, industrial. Although it's referred to as a wash by Fortis, our calculations show that there would be a net extra revenue from the Fort Nelson service area of $157,000 to Fortis, and a delivery rate increase of approximately 6.5%. Stretched out into that 10-year period, sorry, that needs to be contrasted as well with a comparison with the application that was declined by BCUC in 2013-14. But there are a number of factors that are quite different this time around, and Fortis has taken steps to mitigate those things that caused the rejection of the previous application. For example, the earlier proposal would have been a one-time increase very significantly of almost 90% in rates. As said, Fortis proposes to mitigate the increase by feathering it in over a 10-year period. The difference, if the Fort Nelson service area moved, was assigned to provincial rates. The difference in what they will pay, what we would pay, and what those rates would be made up by the larger group of ratepayers across the province over that 10-year period. In return for moving Fort Nelson ratepayers into this more expensive rate, Fortis relies on a number of proposed advantages from their perspective. It would remove the regulatory burden, having to file for two separate entities and having a single filing, which would incorporate virtually all of the province. They would offer long-term rate stability where we've had some volatility in rates. And they seek to persuade the BCUC that fairness across the whole service area of BC would be a positive outcome. And that's not a reference to any advantage to Fort Nelson ratepayers. That's simply they'd like to be fair to everybody in BC. Therefore, our rates would go up and we would contribute to the common pot. Pardon me. Certain factors that would see a smaller future rate increase if we remained in a common, in our own service area rather, would have to do with the fact that they are a cost plus business. So as a cost plus business, the capital stuff in the ground is depreciated. That goes into cost. The service is distributed over as many customers as they serve. With a declining customer base and declining consumption, as we have had over the last 10-year period, the costs per customer go up because the overhead stays relatively the same. The maintenance and the plant that have to produce the gas and deliver it stay relatively the same. Costs go unchanged. And that can work as a positive or a negative. Fortis' argument is that because the trend is a downward trend for our community in terms of usership, costs will continue to increase. And by joining forces with the larger area, the larger number of ratepayers in the province, that increase would become more stable and eventually would settle into something that was more absorbable. And if there were any sudden unexpected capital costs, they would be shared with that base of an additional million ratepayers. Although they rely on this significantly in their arguments to the BCUC, the idea that it would protect Fort Nelson ratepayers from sudden increases based on capital costs, they have not been able to identify what those capital costs might be in specific terms. The other factor that should be considered in evaluating the pros and cons of this for Fort Nelson ratepayers is that there is a major push, and everybody has heard of it, toward electrification, moving away from fossil fuels, gas being a fossil fuel. And if that is successful, and it well may be, given some of the initiatives in the Lower Mainland, for example, City of Vancouver moving toward not allowing new construction to use natural gas as a heating source. If that user base and that consumption base declines in the larger area, costs to those ratepayers will go up. And if in fact Fort Nelson ratepayers are lumped in, they will take that same upward ride. The other factor that comes into the discussion is that in the Lower Mainland, while some of these changes are possible and consumers will have the option of moving to potentially lower cost sources of heat, those same opportunities don't exist in Fort Nelson, not realistically. So moving to electric heat, for example, in Fort Nelson is really not an affordable or a logical proposition. As far as risks associated with staying in our own rate area, some of those risks, those potential capital risks, would appear already to have been absorbed in the Muskwa River crossing. And as previously mentioned, Fortis hasn't been able to identify any significant capital costs upcoming for us. So at this point, the larger the Fortis application to the province for common rates and delivery rates, the two components of the larger project, have been put forward. And the first of the two, the delivery rates component that would take effect actually retroactively January of this year, if approved, is already in motion and already under consideration by the BCUC. The latter component, which is the one that would have the greatest economic impact and the greatest cost impact to Fort Nelson users, is still much more of an open issue. And we are in the process with our partners in the intervention, Fort Nelson and District Chamber of Commerce, in building a case, preparing evidence on which to base a case, should council determine that they want to simply take the approach of not accepting or not going along with the introduction of postage stamp rates. To date, we filed brief arguments, but no final argument has been presented. And pardon me, I guess the discussion for council is whether, or for consideration by council, is for whether we want to stay on our own and absorb any potential risk of capital impacts and other rate increases in isolation of FEI, absorb those costs, pay our own way, or if we want to take the advantage of the potential advantage of moving into the common rate package, and after 10 years coming up to that level. The analysis says that at the 5-year point, we actually begin to pay more than we would pay under the status quo. And that's the turning point. It might be as early as 3 years. The factor that affects that is that in 2021, Fortis was able to over collect from Fort Nelson users. Ordinarily, they would be required by BCUC to return that money to ratepayers in the form of reduced rates, be applied to any increases in rates and or reduction in rates. And what they did was they requested permission from BCUC to retain that overpayment and apply it to the common rate increase package to keep the amount of the rate on an annual basis, a 2% increase, a little lower than it might be otherwise. What our legal representatives have presented to date is that in the interest of fairness, at the very least, that should be returned in the short term. Normal cycle would be a 1 to 2 year return to local ratepayers for a number of reasons. First of all, it's common practice. And second of all, if feathered out over 10 years, some of those who have paid into that fund will not be around in town to benefit. So there's a fairness component to that. As far as particular strategies in making a final argument after we present our evidence, additional information in the form of advice from our legal strategists will be available to council in a closed meeting. And if there are questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. I appreciate that it's been a real education for me. And I understand, having been involved with it since last summer, that there's a reason that there are professionals that do this. It's quite a convoluted process.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Are there any questions for Mr. Gilbert? I note that we're going to be discussing this in the in-camera meeting, so if you do have any questions, you might want to hold them for that. Or you can go ahead and ask Mr. Gilbert any questions you've got now. Councillor Penny?
I don't really have a question, but see what comes out later. But I mean, anything that makes an increase to residents' cost of living is unacceptable in my mind. I realize with the volumes going down and us having the cost plus system with Fortis, and I kind of get all that. Hopefully, if we do finally get some industrial activity here, and it'll kind of sway back off again, and gas usage will be mainly by industrial use, so it'll sway that burden off. But anyway, my feeling is anything that's going to increase costs to residents is unacceptable.
Any other comments?
If I may, Mayor?
Go ahead.
To the councillor's point, that's a key element in our rebuttal. And this gives away no secrets. This doesn't betray our strategy. But in discussions with, or the nature of our questioning to Fortis under the eyes of BCUC, we've already made that point that their projections take a slice of time that represents probably the worst the economy has ever been in the region, and uses that to project a trend which is advantageous to their desired outcome. And we have made the case that we have documentation in the form of, for example, our regional economic strategy and our most recently completed labor study that suggests that the situation in the near future could very well be significantly different and that their trend projections are not valid, and they certainly don't justify what's proposed.
Thank you. Any other comments? Very well. Moving on. Ms. Shepherd, share shed update.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this
evening.
report, hi. This report comes in follow-up to Council's request at the last meeting for further information related to costs and operating considerations of installing a share shed. Currently, the NRM contracts scale operation services for just over $73,000 annually. The contract was signed in November and expires in 2024 with the option for 2 one-year extensions. Contractor estimates effective share shed management would require up to 12 additional hours per week at a rate of $18 an hour, which would amount to an overall budget increase of up to approximately $11,000 annually. The report details some consideration for share shed size and pricing, ranging from $2,000 to $5,500 for structure, and then site preparation, delivery, and installation estimated at approximately $2,500 additionally. The report also provides some options for establishing a fee for use of the share shed, imposing the existing tipping fee, or allowing free use. So there are many nonprofit organizations, buy, sell, trade platforms, and fundraising initiatives that currently accept secondhand goods in the Northern Rockies. If council proceeds with the initiative, there may be a desire to inquire with these groups about impacts to their services following a trial period. And this report is provided for information and no decision is needed at this time.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Penny.
I am generally in favor of this. Obviously, I brought this forward in the first place to get a share shed down there. The costs a little bit higher than I expected, even though the labor rate there seems low. I mean, look at 11,000 over a year, seems like quite a bit. Maybe if we just set what those hours would be, to cut that in half maybe, but as for the shed itself, I was kind of thinking if we just did a CCAN, we could put it down there, do a trial, whether that's a year or 6 months, whatever that is. And I am sure, I'm almost positive that if it didn't work out, that the NRM could find a very valid use for a CCAN somewhere else in the organization. I'm willing to bet. Whether that be for storage of equipment at the rec center or wherever, but I would like to see us give it a try, just because it's so many things I see that get rolled over in that landfill down there. And it really saddens me, and especially when we're doing so much good here in the Northern Rockies with the worms and taking care of the paper and food waste products, and then to watch, I don't know, use an example, a perfectly good lawnmower getting rolled and tilled into the ground. It really bugs me.
Councillor Gerwin.
Yeah, I would like to see us give this a try too. In all of my experience and my research, having a share shed, that's so hard to say.
know.
Share shed. Without supervision is not recommended. So I think that there's going to be a cost to that. I would be more than willing to support it for a year trial. I do have a concern, and which is why I'm thinking we should try the year to see. I don't want to impact, right, the organizations in town that count on this type of material to provide any funding for them. I don't know that it would have an impact or not, but I think it's worth a trial for sure. So I am more than willing to support it for sure.
So from my point of view, I'm willing to support this for a year as well. But I'd like to find some statistics around how many things are being shared and what the benefit is to the municipality, how much stuff is being kept out of our landfill. So we have a cost here of about maybe $20,000, something like that. And I'd like to see the cost versus how much we save from going in the landfill, so we can make an informed decision about this at the end of 1 year. This is not requiring, this is for information right at the moment, so we don't require a motion on that. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Gerwin.
When is it going to come back for decision is my one question if we're not deciding tonight. And then secondly, I would just like to have a discussion about fees. I very much think that there should be the $5 tipping fee. Yeah, so those are my 2 points.
Councillor Penny.
Fingers on the button. I'll wait for CO Barry to first.
Mr. Barry.
Excuse me. I was just gonna say that if council wishes to provide direction tonight, because you provided it, you started discussing where you want to go, so a resolution to give us some direction now versus bringing something back. There's obviously a little more work to do, some firming up process and opportunities for CCAN, because I'm not sure in terms of accessing the CCAN or whatnot, or whatever. It might be cheaper to go a different route, but if council wishes to provide direction now through resolution, then we start to get our marching orders now, including the potential budget, because we would adjust the budget accordingly for the landfill to take into account this process. I'll just
Ms. Shepherd, did you have something to add?
No, I think that's covered it.
Okay, Councillor Penny, did you want to make that motion?
Sure. Read my mind.
Thank you.
I'd make a motion that we move forward or have staff move forward at least to the next step to firm up final costs of implementation, because as COA Barry said, maybe CCAN may not be the best, whatever. Anyway, I'd like to move forward with this and get staff to bring back their recommendations for actually implementing it.
Do I have a second for Councillor Penny's motion? Councillor
second.
Gerwin, seconded by Councillor Gerwin. Ms. Shepherd, go ahead.
Sorry, I did just want to outline in the report, there is other options like a shed in a box style. So I have outlined the pricing for both, like 2,000 to 4,000 relative to square footage for a prefabricated building, and then put in the approximate cost of a CCAN, noting that the CCAN might not be the best, but it's all in there. So you could choose to move forward with that budget in mind or have further costs, of course.
Councillor Penny.
Mr. Barry, when you were mentioning here a moment ago, I want to make whatever the best recommendation is moving forward. I want to get this off the ground. So
May I make a suggestion?
Why not?
Councilor Penny? So I would just add that we proceed with the least expensive option in terms of the shed. So if that's a 16 by 16 or 8 by 8, I don't know, shed in a box is between $2,000 and $4,000. It's a 1-year trial, so we don't know, are we going to need an 8 by 8 or are we going to need a 16 by 16? Like, I don't know.
Councillor Souls.
I know that we had some empty C cans. NRM had some C cans that sat for a long time empty. Are there any empty C cans still sitting in our possession?
Mr.
I'm
Barry.
not aware if we have any empty C cans. We do have C cans, but we're using them either for storage, and one of them, I believe, is one of the ones that SARS, we probably were using it and took out to the airport, but we can confirm that.
Councillor Andrews. Ms. Shepherd, go ahead.
Sorry, I think we got a quote for a used CCAN just before Christmas there, and that was 4,500 for the used CCAN. So my understanding is that there aren't any currently available that the NRM owns already.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
I'm fine with doing an 8 by 8 shed or whatever. I just want to look into the future. If this plan doesn't go through, if after a year we decide it's not going to work, I think the idea, like Councillor Penny said, that the CCAN can get used elsewhere. I just like to keep that in mind. If we're going to be getting a structure, let's think of potential future use in case this project doesn't work.
Councillor Gerwin.
I think that I wonder if we can check with the landfill attendant, because she's got significant experience in this, and I'm wondering if she can provide some direction on the size of the shed. Like, I have no idea, but she might.
So what I'm hearing is that some further investigation is needed on the part of staff here to firm up what size of shed, et cetera. Maybe to consult with the landfill operator. Councillor Penny?
This is so easy. eh? To Councillor Andrews' point, that's exactly what I was thinking, is that I would hate to see us do a trial run, pick the cheapest option right now, whatever, shed in a box type thing. We go down and set it up, and then it's not something that's easily picked up and moved to a different location. That's my only thought with the CCAN, is that if this doesn't work, off it goes to Public Works or wherever else, right? I don't know, maybe if the shed in the box would do the same. I have no idea, but I really like Councillor Gerwing's idea that maybe we should discuss it a little more with the operator down there and find out what she thinks would work best. She's watched all this stuff go through landfill for all these years.
Councillor Andrews?
My last one on this, I swear.
Okay.
At one point, the high school used to build sheds as a program. It might be worth looking into.
Some very good options. Do you need some direction, staff, then? Or do you have sufficient amount to continue investigating this and bring back the best options to council? How about that?
Is that a resolution?
The resolution reads that staff move forward to the next step to firm up final cost for implementation for the share shed with recommendations to be brought back to council, and then proceed with the least expensive option in terms of the shed.
Maybe
Do-
just delete the
Do
least
you want me to
expensive option. and
strike the least expensive option?
We can, if you strike the least expensive option, when it comes back, we could still choose the least expensive option. So let's strike the least expensive option. That's the motion. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. David Dominic, admin report number 17. Northern Rockies Regional Municipality Public Works Fire Hall Building Update, project update for information.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just basically wanted to give you an update of where we're at with this specific project. At this time, we are proceeding with the renewal of the foundation. Tendering for that work's expected to be in the spring. And that's kind of the priority at this point, is to get all the imperative structural work out of the way and that done first. The next steps will also involve working with our consultants for the rest of the renewal work that was encompassed in the original grant application, as well as the potential to look at maximizing efficiencies with the current space that both departments have to work with presently. So just kind of a general update for you guys of where we're at with the building.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Dominic on this? Hearing none, Mr. Dominic, I'll ask you to move on to the Toad River Community Water Supply Update, min report number 18.
Absolutely. And so this is just another project update on this potential water supply. So a bit of a history in this one was the request came to investigate the water supply at the community hall in 2019 at the Toad River Special Regional Council meeting. Since then, we've retained our consultants, performed an assessment, and the water supply at the community hall was found to be insufficient. Also determining that we needed a new well there as well. There was an opportunity in March 2021 to drill a new well, which took place, and we are now in a position to potentially expand this into a potable water system. Currently, our next steps are going to be engaging stakeholders in the Toad River area to get their thoughts and feedback on this project. A further breakdown of the capital costs are being obtained by staff at this time, and that's also worthy to note that the exact operational requirements and their costs associated with them will be confirmed at a later date, largely due to cooperation with Northern Health, who will determine the guidelines and requirements of a potable water system of this size, should that be the direction.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Dominic on this? Councillor Souls.
I just almost fell over when I realized that it costs about $1,000 a person for run a water system. Per year.
Any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Dominic.
Thank you.
Mrs. Laval. Grant application to UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Emergency Operations Center funding system.
Thank you, Mayor. So it is UBCM's Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant season again. So the first one to open under this stream was the Emergency Operations Center funding stream. So we're looking for council support of a grant application to help offset the costs of the proposed generator capital project that's included in the 2022 budget, along with a small amount for some administrative support for updates and revisions to our emergency response plan.
I'll make that motion. Seconded by Councillor Gerbing. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Admin report number 20, 2022 second quarter grant and aid requests. Ms. McIver.
So this is pretty standard. We're into our second quarter intake for 2022 grant and aid. There is, I'll just draw your attention to a small error on the second attachment. So the 3 applications that were received are as they are described in the report, which is the Northern Lights Festival, Fort Nelson Event Society for the Northern Lights Festival, the Arts Council for the Arts Walk, and the Sled Dogs for the banquet. So this is just suggesting that you approve their applications, and also that we will need a budget for this year that I know that not favorable necessarily to pre-approve budgets, but given the timing of 2 of their applicants' events, they will require the funds sooner than later.
Councillor Penny.
I just request that we separate the vote on these because I'd like to leave the room for the Fort Nelson Event Society.
Very well. Let's do the Event Society first. Okay, I'll make the motion that we accept the application for the Event Society. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Gerwing. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Penny. And I'll make a motion that we approve the grants for the other 2. Seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. And I'll ask for a motion that the council pre-approve the 2022 discretionary grant and made budget of $20,000. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Goering is opposed. Thank you. Admin report number 21, street pole banners, Fort Nelson Secondary School, Toad River and Shallow School graduations for decision. Ms. Hanson.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Council. As a result of the pandemic and the inability of the graduating classes to have their usual celebration, Council had provided funding for the purchase and installation of street pole banners recognizing the graduates of all the high schools in the NRRM in the past 2 years. With the positive feedback received from the citizens, it is hoped that Council will approve this to be an annual program. If approved, if approval could be received at this early date, it would allow for time to source better quality and design of the banners. The preliminary budget presented to Council on January 27th did include a $5,000 increase to the street pole banner annual budget for this program.
Any discussion? Councillor Souls.
I'm in favor of this happening in this, as long as it's not seen or perceived as a permanent solution to a problem that needs to go away. The having real grad ceremonies and real grad parades and so on is much better, but this is actually something that could accentuate it anyway. So I see it as having done.
Counselor Penny.
I don't see it as a substitute either, but I have heard great things about this. People are pretty happy about it. I see the graduates going out there and, taking a look at them afterwards and that sort of thing. So I'm very much in favor of it and like to see it continue, even once we go back to actually having proper graduation ceremonies.
Any other comments? Counselor Penny, would you like to make that motion?
I'm going to take option number 1.
Counselor Souls, would you like to second that?
I certainly would.
All those in favor? Carried. Northern Rockies Region Municipality Revenue Anticipated Borrowing Bylaw number 200. The Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 200, 2022 be given first, second, third, and final adoption. Ms. Pike.
Good evening. Or I can almost say good morning.
Yeah. What a trooper.
This is a standard annual bylaw that we request to proceed with our renewals at our banking institution.
Thank you. Any discussion? I'll make a motion then that we approve the first, second, and third reading and final adoption of the Revenue Anticipated Borrowing Bylaw number 200. Do I have a second for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Correspondence letter from Bruce Ralston, Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. It's a thank you letter for the book of that I gave him from Dr. Kenyon, history of the Alaska or history of the Liard Basin. Received for information, Dan Davies, Minister Heyman, Environment Climate Change regarding the FISA at the lower pool, and the Resource Municipalities Coalition call for an audit of Northern Health. And Minister George Heyman has replied to MLA Davies regarding the lower pool at the Liard Hot Springs. Any comments? Very well. Council information package from January 26th, council information package from February 2nd, 2022, and council information package February 9th, 2022, received for information. New business. Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, I was, it was brought to my attention a concern that BC Wildlife Federation has, and I just thought it prudent to bring up to council, and I would request that the link I forwarded off be available on our Facebook pages and everywhere else. I'll just read the first paragraph from their website. So the BC Wildlife Federation is concerned that a tentative agreement between Treaty 8 First Nations and the provincial government will result in a 50% reduction of moose harvest and complete closure of caribou hunting for resident hunters of northeastern BC. Just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Thank you. Any comments on the item brought forward by Councillor Andrews? Very well. Universal no-cost coverage for prescription contraceptives. There was a letter sent to us from Vernon, British Columbia, where there is a movement to have the province of British Columbia cover contraceptions at no cost to women across British Columbia. I thought it was a good idea, and I thought that this council should endorse that, and I thought it would bring it forward for discussion. Is there any discussion on this? Very well. I'll make a motion that we endorse that letter then. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Penny. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Carried. All those opposed? Councillor Souls is opposed. Rec stats, January 2022, received for information. Any councillor reports? Councillor Andrews.
Just go back to my notes, sorry. So on the 1st of February, I attended the Phoenix Leader Board meeting. They seem to be doing quite well. They're looking at an RSP match for management. I also had the McQuaig meeting to go over what the potential looks like there. The theater has some accessibility issues they would like to have looked at. And some storage options would be nice. That's really about it. And then I also attended today the initial public engagement for the draft Caribou Recovery Plan. There is a lot of concern about not all the information being released, but because of the estimate debates, the province has held the majority of the information. Then just as of note, there's a proposed 16% reduction on our annual allowable cut in our area and no foreseen limit to current oil and gas exploration, but they don't want to see, there's a lot of new ground disturbances they don't want to see. That's about it for now.
Thank you. Any comments on Councillor Andrews' report? Very well. Any other reports? Okay, I attended the Resource Municipalities Coalition as well as the NDIT RAC meeting in Fort St. John. Did the Resource Municipalities Coalition meeting virtually and the RAC meeting in person, and I'll be chairing the RAC meeting in March. Are there any virtual attendees who have any questions? Seeing none? Very well. I think we need a break. So before we go into an in-camera meeting, maybe we'll temporarily adjourn the special or the regional council meeting. Sure. Move that we temporarily adjourn the meeting. Moved by Councillor Penny, or seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.